Hey all, this is Radahn. Today we're going to look at the lore behind Stormveil Castle. Specifically the lore behind the many holes and extensive damage throughout the structure. The pattern of these holes is unusual and resembles a disease, as if the building itself is sick. And from these holes and many other places burst out white thorns, further marring the otherwise impressive building. The odd thing about this damage, these holes and especially these thorns, is that they don't exist anywhere else in the game. It's an attribute unique to Stormveil. So in this video I'm going to present all of the potentially relevant evidence regarding these holes, and then I'm going to come to some speculative conclusions. Conclusions that I'm sure most people will find surprising. We'll start by explaining what these holes are not. In the past I've heard theories that these holes were caused by a dragon attack. There are in several places gashes that seem to come from large claw marks. One of the most obvious is in Godrick's boss room, and Godrick does have an impaled dragon there. But the gashes on the wall here are impossibly large. There aren't any dragons that could make an attack like this, with the possible exception of Grandsax or Greyroll. And it couldn't have been those two. Grandsax died before the shattering, and Greyroll is unable to move. But more importantly, that explanation provides no answer to the thorns or the more circular-shaped holes that are the more common in Stormveil. And the gashes in Godrick's boss room have the same telltale coloration as all the other holes in the castle. Another old theory I've heard is that the holes are a result of battles Godrick had during the shattering. We know he challenged Malenia and lost, and from Kenneth Haight we know that he ran from Radahn and hid in his castle. If that's the case, there's speculation that Radahn could have put the castle under siege, and the holes are the result of artillery or Radahn throwing meteors at the castle himself. The problem with that theory is that the holes we see are not the kinds of holes that would result from artillery or a meteor attack. They're too clean, like something bored right through. This also doesn't explain anything about the thorns, and principally, you can find holes on the inside of the castle, in places where they haven't been exposed to the outside wall, and therefore can't be the result of something bursting in. No, the affliction of Stormveil is something that happens spontaneously. There are little gashes on the ground that you can see, and these gashes have the same odd coloration as the other wounds. And on these gashes there are these large metal staples that seem to be trying to close up the hole to prevent the gash from opening up and becoming a circle. The source of the malady is revealed by the marred wooden shield description. It reads, "Wooden shield of Stormveil soldiers. Much like the castle, it is marred by mottling and thorns. Some say it is the curse of grafting which causes such affliction, while others talk of its root being something altogether more sinister, hidden deep within the castle. The shield's appearance confirms that it suffers from the same thing that the castle does, and its description tells us that among people they speculate that the curse is caused by grafting, or something else, more sinister beneath the castle." We're going to ignore the grafting for the moment, since the shield seems to be pointing us towards the other explanation, the face beneath Godrick's castle. That face belongs to Godwyn the Golden, Prince of Death. The face is identical in appearance to Godwyn's true corpse in the Deeproot Depths, missing only his eyes. Roger refers to that face as the misshapen corpse beneath Stormveil Castle. He calls it a sacred relic of the Black Knives plot. And when he goes down there to investigate, he is suddenly afflicted with deathblight. We know from the Deathroot item description that after Godwyn's death, the rune of death spread through the roots of the great tree, and sprouted on the surface as Deathroot. You can see the result of this all over the lands between. Godwyn's internment into the great tree seems to be replicating him everywhere. You find copies of his eyes anywhere that Deathroot can be found. So there's no doubt that this corpse is an offshoot of Godwyn, and that it's the source for the affliction marring Stormveil Castle. But that's actually very unusual, because what's happening to Stormveil isn't happening anywhere else, even in places where the spread of Godwyn is prevalent. To begin with, there's no area that duplicated his entire corpse. It's true that you can find Godwyn's eyes all over the place, but you never find another location other than the one in Stormveil that has replicated him to this degree. There's also no place infected by Deathblight that has this mottling, and especially these thorns. These thorns are nowhere. They're not associated with the Death Prince at all. You might think that the roots associated with Deathblight do have thorns, but if you look closely at the animation and at the static Deathblight model, you'll see that those are not thorns. And no matter how closely you search on the Deathblight root, you're not going to find thorns that look anything like the thorns of Stormveil Castle. And you're not going to find these open sores in the buildings next to them either. So what's going on here? Assuming this curse is caused by the Prince of Death beneath the castle, why is that curse affecting Stormveil differently? Why is it receiving special and different attention? Let's put a pin on that, we'll get back to it in a moment. Before going further, we need to focus on the thorns. Thorns in Elden Ring are interesting because they always mean one thing. They're associated to one concept. And that concept is punishments for the guilty. And this is true in all cases. Anytime you see briars or thorns, they're tied directly to punishments for the guilty. The briar armor reads, "The winding rusted iron briars are a mark of the guilty, and typically indicate a sentence to death." The Mariah's Executioner's Sword confirms that Elamar of the Briar was a prisoner sentenced to death. The Guilty Hood says, "The garb of those accused of lesser crimes, indicated by the collar of sharpened branches." Okay, so all of these item descriptions suggest that thorns and briars are associated with guilt and punishment symbolically. But the next few item descriptions suggest that it's not just a symbolic representation. The Briars of Punishment spell reads, "An aberrant sorcery discovered by exiled criminals. The guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, lived in eternal darkness. There they discovered the blood star." Alright, so the thorn sorcerers following the fire monks around are exiled criminals who had their eyes gouged out by thorns. They were probably exiled to the mountaintop of the giants to serve alongside the fire monks as a punishment for their crimes. They were blind so they couldn't see, and in the darkness of being blind they discovered the blood star. This allowed them to cast thorn sorceries. The blood star functions like an outer god. Whereas the Mother of Truth is associated with wounds and blood, the blood star is associated with guilt and punishment. This implies that thorns are not a mere symbol. They are innately and directly tied to the blood star. Now going back to Stormveil Castle, we can see that Godrick's soldiers are also afflicted with thorns. The description on their armor reads, "Worn by soldiers sent to the penal colonies," meaning that these exiles are criminals. Criminals that are being magically punished with thorns. By magically, I mean that this isn't done by an existing in-game institution. It's just kind of happening. Now let's reread the description of the marred leather shield. Leather shield of Stormveil soldiers. Much like the castle, it is marred by mottling and thorns. Some say it is the curse of grafting which causes such affliction, while others talk of its root being something altogether more sinister, hidden deep within the castle. Now the interesting thing about this description is that it's describing the point of view of people in the game world, maybe the point of view of the soldiers themselves. And from their point of view, they believe that the curse is a punishment. And of course they do. They're covered in thorns. The castle's covered in thorns. So for them, there's no question that they're being punished. They're cursed for some reason. The only question is why? Is it the grafting or something else? And the shield's description points to it being something else. The Godwyn corpse beneath the castle. And for a final piece of evidence that the corpse is in fact the source of the thorns, there are thorned roots spreading out from the corpse. And these thorned roots don't exist in any other place that has Deathblight. It is only in this place, this castle, that Godwyn and the Thorns of Punishment are connected, which means that it has to do with both. It's not just punishment, it's punishment that's directly related to something about Godwyn. And the only thing I can think of that would satisfy both of these conditions is that Godrick was involved in Godwyn's murder, that he was a conspirator in the Night of the Black Knives. We'll have that as the hypothesis for the moment. And in this next section, we'll look for evidence supporting that idea. The first interesting thing to consider is How did Godrick survive the Night of the Black Knives? Godwyn was the first to die, but he wasn't the only one. In the Bandai Namco Elden Ring website, there are details about the attack. The site says, "One grim night in the depths of winter, a flock of unknown assassins stole across the lands between. In a cutaneous attack, this foul covenant snuffed out the lives of many of the God Queen's kin throughout the Empire, too numerous and too scattered for her godly protection to save." This account is corroborated by the ghost near the Wandering Mausoleum in the Weeping Peninsula. The ghost confirms that the person inside the mausoleum is a demigod child of Marika, and saying as Godwyn was the first to die, these must be the ones that died soon after in the same attack. And there's also the story trailer for Elden Ring, in which Ranni describes the events leading to the Shattering. She says that the demigods began to fall, starting with Godwyn the Golden, implying that more fell after Godwyn did. So, the Black Knife assassins attacked simultaneously across the lands between, targeting several demigods, maybe targeting all the demigods. And they managed to successfully kill several, including one of the strongest, Godwyn the Golden. Now, when this attack happened, both Godrick and the Black Knife assassins were at the royal capital. Remember, Godrick is not from Stormveil and he's not there willingly. Stormveil is considered to be on the fringes of civilization. The Banished Knight helm tells us that perhaps the deep red scarf was used to block the winds, for on the outskirts the winds bite with a stinging fierceness. In the 1.0 version of Elden Ring, the description for the exile armor says that Stormveil was once a place of exile, and this cloth is a remainder from the convicted men's precepts. There are exiled soldiers here and banished knights, because this castle is where they were exiled and banished to. This is the penal colony referenced in the exile armor description. When Godrick is defeated in his boss fight, he says, "I am the lord of all that is golden, and one day we'll return together, to our home, bathed in rays of gold." He's talking about Leyndell, and it becomes a lot more obvious that he's talking about Leyndell in the cut dialogue that this saying is from.
"One day we'll return together, to our home, bathed in rays of gold. There is only one tree, and only its branches, that bathe in true rays of gold. Not the fool-omened king, nor the rank malformed twins. Oh, we are the golden ones, the true and rightful heirs. Our land's grown old now, ashen and cold. But look up, the Erd-tree glows. One day we'll return together, to our home, bathed in rays of gold. And grace will surely guide us safe, to our home, bathed in rays of gold."
In that context, it's clear now that what Godrick says when he dies is a part of a poem. Godrick was hounded from the royal capital, and so he and his army retreated to Limgrave, and they repeat this poem to themselves, dreaming of the day that they can go back to Leyndell and take back their lordship. This shows that Godrick resided in Leyndell and did not leave until he was hounded out after his army's defeat. Now we also know that the Black Knife assassins attacked the royal capital. The Black Knife Tyche ashes read, "Tyche was an assassin who, on the night of the plot, imbued her black knife with the rune of death and slew Godwyn the Golden. She was the daughter of Black Knife ringleader Alecto, and was killed protecting her mother during their flight from the royal capital." So Tyche was part of the group that attacked the capital. Now I want you to consider that for a moment. The Black Knife assassins were in the capital, actively looking for demigods to kill. They successfully killed several demigods that night, and they even managed to kill Godwyn the Golden, presumably one of the strongest. And Godrick is at the capital at the time. He's right there. So how did Godrick manage to survive if Godwyn couldn't? Well, one possibility is that they didn't attack him because he was involved. He helped them into the capital and pointed them in Godwyn's direction. There's a sword monument in the Altus Plateau. That monument reads, "The first defense of Leyndell. A sovereign alliance rots from within. Traces yet remain of a bloody conspiracy." This sword monument is describing a battle and the events that led to the battle. Since the battle is one of the ones in the Shattering, this must have happened after the Night of the Black Knives. There was a sovereign alliance, probably the alliance of the people who have chairs in Morgoth's boss room. Ranni the Witch, Praetor Rykard, General Radahn, Godrick the Golden, and the twins Miquella and Melania. And probably Morgott was among them at this point as well. In that Godrick poem-cut dialogue, he refers to the fool Omen King, so he at least knows about him. This alliance was an attempt to jointly rule after Marika shattered the Elden Ring. Godwyn's dead, Marika's not around, the remaining demigods form this sovereign alliance. But the alliance rots from within because traces yet remain of a bloody conspiracy. The alliance members are suspicious of one another. They believe some of the members are involved in the Night of the Black Knives, and they are correct. Ranni claims that she did it all, and freely admits to forging the Black Knife assassin daggers. Her brother Rykard is involved as well. The Blasphemous Claw item description reads, "On the night of the dire plot, Ranni rewarded Praetor Rykard with these traces. Should the coming trespass one day transpire, they would serve as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge Malekith the Black Blade." So we have 2 confirmed conspirators. It wouldn't be surprising if there were more. The Sword Monument tells us that the suspicion around the conspiracy caused the Sovereign Alliance to rot from within and led to the first defense of Leyndell. That first defense is where Godrick attacked the capital. We know that because the ancient dragon knight Kristoff's ashes say that after the first defense of Leyndell, Kristoff earned a hero's honor of Erdtree burial for the feat of capturing Godefroy the Grafted. Now, as much as I hate to admit that Godefroy is ever relevant to the lore, this does mean that the battle in the story trailer where we see Godrick's army lay siege to Leyndell was the battle described in the Sword Monument. So traces of the conspiracy remain, it makes the group in the Alliance suspicious, and these suspicions cause Godrick to kick off the Shattering War by attacking the capital. Perhaps they were suspicious of him, and perhaps with good reason. Now, admittedly, all of this evidence is circumstantial. If we only had this speculation, I wouldn't have much of a case. But let's not forget, there is a face of Godwyn underneath Stormveil Castle, and that face is the source of the thorns. We can't get around those facts. You can see the thorns jutting out of the face and heading into the castle. It might seem unusual that the Blood Star and the Prince of Death have some kind of cooperative effect on this castle. But in fact, it's not the first time something like this has happened with the Blood Star. The Fire Monks and the Fire Prelates are a group that is tasked with guardianship of the fire god's flame. They are closely linked and in fact often seduced by that fell fire. And yet they are also associated with the Blood Star. The thorned whip carried by the Fire Prelates is described as a device of religious encouragement, fashioned in the image of the Briars of Sin. So after the convicted exiles were sent to join the ranks of the Fire Monks, they discovered the Blood Star, and that Blood Star incorporated itself into a pre-existing order that was already in service to the fell god. So the Blood Star is opportunistic. It uses the guilty as a medium, and is happy to partner with whatever great powers it can. If the Thorns and the Montling in Stormveil were there by themselves, I wouldn't be very surprised. The place did used to be a penal colony, the people that are in it are exiles. It's not a wonder that the walls and the soldiers are covered in thorns. But if we accept that the Prince of Death's face is the source of those thorns, then it becomes possible and perhaps even likely that the curse is due to something Godrick did to Godwyn, and his involvement in the Night of the Black Knives is the only thing I can think of that would cause this. Alright, that's all of the evidence regarding this theory. There is, however, one problem with it that I haven't been able to work out. And that problem is, why isn't Godrick himself affected by the thorns? If he is the cause of the curse, then he should be one of the primary ones afflicted. The only thing I can think of is that the Blood Star doesn't seem to just affect everyone that's guilty. It affects people that are found guilty. In every situation where you have thorns, those people were convicted. They were criminals that were caught and sentenced, and the Blood Star can seem to use those people as a medium. It can exert its power through them. The Thorn Sorcerers didn't find the Blood Star until after their eyes were gouged out and they were sent in exile to the mountaintop of the Giants. Most of Godrick's soldiers don't have the thorns. It's only the ones in the castle that were part of the penal colony before Godrick got there. The castle itself is a part of that colony, and so it too can feel the Blood Star's influence. Godrick's part in the Night of the Black Knives was never proven. He was never caught. There was only suspicion surrounding him, And because he was never punished, perhaps the Bloodstar can't reach him, and so is attacking all the things it can around him. And that's the end of this video. If you can think of another reason why Godwyn would be the source of the thorns that don't appear anywhere else, I'd be happy to hear about that. Please write about it in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching.